Hello, folks.
Hello, everyone.
Hello.
Welcome.
Let's try. Ooh.
Great. Let's maybe start by, if you type into the chat function, if you can find the chat function, and just type in your name and maybe where you're based and if you paddle with a club. That would be great. Excellent. So while everyone's introducing themselves on here, we're really lucky tonight to have three experts who are going to be helping us on this webinar about VHF and safety signalling. So I'm going to ask them each to introduce themselves. Gordon, would you like to introduce yourself first, please?
Yeah, certainly. Good evening, everyone. I'm Gordon Barton. I work with Maritime and Coast Guard Agency, working out of MRCC Aberdeen as a search and rescue mission coordinator. On top of that, I am a paddler myself and an advanced sea kayak leader, sea kayak coach.
Fantastic. And Ian, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, sure, Russell. Good evening, everyone. I'm Ian Wilson. I am the Lifeboat Operations Manager at Dunbar Lifeboat in the Firth Forth. We have two lifeboats here, an ALB and an ILB. That's an offshore boat and an inshore boat. I have been with the RNLI for nearly 50 years. Previously at Oban, North Berwick and Aberdyfi in Wales on different classes of boats, doing different things. But I'm also an advanced powerboat trainer and examiner, a VHF assessor, a sea survival instructor, other bits and pieces.
Fantastic. And Tony?
Yeah,
hi.
I'm Tony Hammock. I live over in Oban, well, just outside Oban. I've been paddling forever, well, since the Beatles made the White Album anyway. And for the last 25 years, I've been running a sea kayaking outfit on the west coast here. I've done a lot of expeditioning work. I've done a lot of incident management training, and I'm also now water safety advisor in the Oban area for the RNLI.
Fantastic. So we're going to be hearing from all three throughout, but also we're keen to hear from yourselves. This is an interactive session. Please ask questions in the chat, and we're going to create points throughout the evening when we're really hoping you unmute and get involved and share your thoughts, your experiences, your ideas, and ask any questions. This is a rare opportunity to hear from a variety of professionals and experts in this area. I'm going to start sharing some slides. I'm going to take us through that. So just bear with me, I'll get that moving. So hopefully I get a thumbs up. Is that no? Great, fantastic. So we've got the contact details for all of our speakers this evening. We'll have these at the end, and we'll also be sharing this in the reading, supplementary reading as well. So you can follow up directly as well as via myself and Paddle Scotland. What are we going to be looking at tonight? Well, we're going to start off with a big question. Why? Why do we need comms on the water? And then we're going to dive into, once we've kind of set that, we'll look at VHF primarily. And then we will, we'll play with some scenarios, and I'm really hoping that everyone engages and we can make that quite interactive. And then we'll look at other ways in which we can approach distress calling, other technologies that we may choose to use. And then we'll look at what's the difference between distress calling and signalling. So we'll look at what the options are there. And then we'll tie it off with, a bit of kind of good housework on what else should we be doing, So probably looking at route plans, leaving that so that people know where we are, and ice. So in case of emergency, contact details. Okay. So we're going to start with a poll. I think Charlotte's going to kindly share that with everyone. And if you can fill that in, that would be amazing. So hopefully you can all see that on your screens. Just we've just got a couple more to go.
The last 10-second warning for any last minute answers, and then I'll end the poll. There we go.
Great. And then can you share the results, please, Charlotte?
Yep. That should hopefully be visible now.
Can everyone see the results there? Fantastic. So that's really interesting. We've got blowing the whistle 6 times is quite high at 31%. Mayday straight away on VHF at 38%. And activating the PLB at 27%. From our panel of experts, would anyone want to say anything at this point based on this? Is there a right or wrong answer?
They're all right. They're all right. Whatever anybody put there will work, and I guess that everybody, when they pressed something on their poll, had a scenario in mind. So although they may not work all of them as well as others for every scenario, each of them will work for your own scenario.
Fantastic. So that's great. So let's just move forward with that. But I think this points to that's the key thing, isn't it? It's scenario dependent what you do.
It is to some extent. I'll just add here as well. I like that a lot of people said blow the whistle 6 times, and although it might not be a whistle, alerting the rest of your group is probably the first thing that should be done in my mind. If I introduce you to a concept of hierarchy of rescue, the person in trouble is not the person you should be looking after first. It's the rescuer, then the group you're with, and then the person needing rescued or the person in trouble. So alerting the group was a good choice in my mind. But as you say, scenario dependent.
Fantastic. That's great. So let's have a look here at some research which Tony has kindly shared with us, and he's diligently pulled together. And this really looks at why do we need to communicate on the water? Tony, do you want to give us a bit of an oversight here, please?
Yeah, I wouldn't say it's quite as I wouldn't quite describe it as you did, because this is a chart of the fatalities that I'm aware of that have occurred around Scotland in the last 20 years. It's not an exhaustive list, and it doesn't include incidents where no one died, which of course are probably the majority of them. However, it does illustrate a few points. Down the left-hand side there is the list of the incidents. I've just given the location, obviously no names or numbers, and I've given the year that they happened in. Along the top, the stuff that I put in this analysis are how many people were present at the time and how many died. What were they paddling? Was there a weather trap involved? And just to explain what a weather trap is, that's one of these situations where it looks all right when you get on and you get around the corner and it wasn't like you thought it was going to be. Was it a weather trap situation? The next column with a little star and the moon at the top was it daylight or night? And the next column was the person trained? Had they done any kind of training whatsoever? The next column is, did they actually call for assistance in any way? The next column is kit. Did they have decent kit? Let's just keep it as vague as that. And then the right-hand column is, which I can barely see through all these things that are popping up on my screen, is the basic scenario, what happened. So first thing to say is it's really hard to come by this information. It's very difficult to get the actual story. Interestingly, big difference between the culture here and in the US and Canada. In the US and Canada, you can buy books, can get them online here, of stories of these incidents, and you can learn from them. In the UK, we tend to be very, very coy about the story behind these incidents. The information I've gathered is not completely reliable. It's been basically secondhand information from people I've managed to talk to who were either there or have had a solid discussion with someone who was there. And incidentally, I think I've accidentally sent you the wrong version of this file because that top line shouldn't be there. I've decided to delete that one because I've decided that the information I have on it is too vague. Anyway, what can we see in this? Hello, is it gone?
I've moved on to the key points from the data. Is that correct, or would you like
Can you go back to the other one from that?
Certainly.
Yeah. Okay, right. So first of all, the news from this is, if you look down that fatality and group thing, you'll see the vast majority of them were people who were paddling on their own. Very, very clear signal there. And if you look along to the trained column, you'll also see that basically very, very few of these people have got any training at all. And the message, as far as I can tell, is that the number of people who've died around the Scottish coast since the year 2000 who knew what they were doing at all and who were out with anybody else who knew what they were doing at all, as far as I know, the number of fatalities is 0. I have heard rumours about an incident in Loch Fyne a while ago, but I've not been able to get hold of any solid information. So if anybody knows any different to that, I'd really like to know. But I believe the score is 0. So that should give us some pleasure, but not make us complacent. The strong signal for that is that, I mean, we know that incidents happen all the time. You know, clubs go out, people fall in, stuff happens. I go out with clients and occasionally something goes wrong. Stuff happens all the time. But if there are people there who know what they're doing, it turns out all right, mostly, okay? So that's number one. That's the really strong signal for this data from me. Okay, a couple of other things quickly to mention is if you go along to the little column that tells you whether it was daylight or night, well, they all happened in daylight. All of them, all the ones I know about. You know, maybe I haven't got, I'm sure I haven't got a total list. I think that's relevant when we come to talk about LED flares. It's getting less relevant because they're getting a lot better, but all the adverts you see for LED flares are showing them being used at night. But actually, all these fatalities occurred in daylight. So just need to bear that in mind. Okay, do you want to, oh yes, and then on the under the column called for help, I think this strongly supports the whole point of having this session, this webinar really is. To my knowledge, only one of these people actually called for help. I can't say for sure whether any of the others were equipped to call for help, but from the scanty information I have, it seems highly unlikely. And from what I know of all of these incidents, I think it would be reasonable to say that had they been equipped to call for help and did call for help, they probably wouldn't have died, or at least there was a good chance that they would have been rescued in time. There is one sad story where apparently the person did call for help, but the story seems to be that they gave an incorrect location. So that might also be pertinent when we're talking about the use of this kit. Okay, do you want to, unless anybody wants to ask any questions about those individual incidents, not that they're going to get much answer from me because it's very scanty data. Anybody want to ask about any of them? Or the situation generally?
Ian, fantastic.
Tony, just a quick question. Is there any data for the other side of the coin, for the people who did call for help or who were trained, and what was the outcome for them?
I can't find any source of data on that. But I know, it's, I've taken care for the last 25 years to collect all the information I could about fatalities. If I collect information about stuff that happened and turned out all right, I wouldn't have time to do anything else, because there's so many incidents from minor to quite serious occur. So there's been loads and loads and loads of incidents. These are the ones that I'm aware of that turn out to be fatal. So no, I can't. I'm nowhere near being able to tell you that kind of ratio.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you, Tony. Is there anything you would want to add with your water safety as hat on, as well as Water Safety Scotland, as well as Coast Guard hats?
Oh, I've got all they're combined in my head. Okay. Can I just mention this slide quickly? I know I've already mentioned some of it. So basically the message is that paddling on your own, unless you really, really, really know what you're doing, is pretty dangerous. And my personal view is that that is not stressed strongly enough within the safety messaging that goes out from, well, certainly from the RNLI. It's something I've mentioned. I'm not saying don't paddle on your own. I do, but it requires extreme caution. I mentioned about the messaging, and hang on a second. Oh yeah, one other little bit. I'll be quite interested in what other people think of this and any feedback. A side story here is that I've come across some stories of people trying to deploy paddle floats and ending up, well, in one case dead, and in other cases being rescued by the RNLI. I don't have much data on that, but it's something I'm quite interested in. So if anybody knows of any stories about that, or of stories of people using them successfully in rough conditions, then I'm interested in that. And also, I'm sure we'll get onto this, but the reliability of these various methods of communication that we're likely to talk about is highly variable. And I think people need to be aware of that, and need to be aware that just having one method is a bit dodgy. Okay, that's it. I'm finished.
I'd like to add a positive point, and it's just from personal experience, but it's from quite a lot of personal experience, that of the 4 lifeboat stations I've been associated with over 50 years, I think the percentage of paddlers who have called to help that we've gone out to, we have rescued 100%.
Fantastic. That's wonderful to hear.
I'll just, if I could just cut in as well. Tony was talking about incidents where there hasn't been a fatality. Now, 2024, I think we saw 1 fatality, which was the Loch Fyne one, Tony. Coast Guard incident statistics under manual paddling sports, and this includes a few in Northern Ireland just due to the makeup of the Coast Guard operational zones, there was 196 manual paddle sport incidents in the Scotland and Northern Ireland area in 2024 that we were aware of.
And they've all had and they've all had bar one positive outcomes effectively. Yep.
Yeah.
Amazing. Great. Well, let's look at, let's look at how you can be one of the good statistics and how you can encourage a culture within your club and your peer paddlers that is going to increase the odds of a positive outcome. So we'll look at VHF and the benefits of it. Who would like to give us an overview of that? Gordon or Ian?
Yeah, certainly. So VHF radios, I think most people will be aware of what a VHF is. Two distinct types that we have now. We have VHF, which is just radio telephony or voice communications, but also there's the option of digital selective calling as well on that. Benefits of VHF, and I think one of the main ones for me is when you put out a call on VHF, you're not just calling the Coast Guard, you're calling everyone in the area that will pick up that signal. So you may find yourself in a situation where the nearest lifeboat might be half an hour away, but there may be another vessel a lot closer, and that might be your quickest sort of help to you. So big benefit of VHF is that putting out a call to everyone. Once you've established communications, you can then obviously speak to people who are coming to rescue you. You can speak to the lifeboat, you can speak to the helicopter, you can speak to the Coast Guard rescue teams. Telephone doesn't allow you to do that. So you've got communications with everyone responding as well as the Coast Guard. There is obviously specific training needed for VHF, but that training's readily available. And yeah, going on to DSC, I don't know if you want me to talk about that at this time, but it's basically DSC itself is just a digital subsystem of the radio, which sends sort of high-speed messages digitally over the VHF frequencies. That DSC can be used for alerting people to distress calls as well as urgency, safety, and routine calls. I like to just describe it as, like, for people of a certain age, it's a glorified pager. It's a way of sending someone a message to let them know that you're going to then follow up with voice communications afterwards.
I could add a couple of benefits to that.
Please.
I think with VHF, once you broadcast that message, you're also invoking the legal requirement of everybody under the Safety of Life at Sea legislation to help, unless it'll put them at risk to help. And as search and rescue assets come out to help you, with VHF, we can direction find on your VHF set. We can't with a radio, but if you've got your radio, particularly in something with as low visibility as a kayak, it's another method of us finding you once we get in the area.
That's fantastic. So I love that idea that you've actually kind of mandated everyone around you to help with your help with your predicament, and then you've made it easier to be found. Because VHF tends to be, we tend to think of it as kind of this really old technology, and it is old, but that means that it's not been a fad, and it's got a very wide user base. It's got really good distribution, but it's got interesting peculiarities around comms protocol, which we'll come to as well, which can be a strength because once you get used to it, perhaps it could be a way to clarify your own thought processes in the midst of an incident. We'll have a look here just before we dive into that. here's the masts of the VHF reception stations for the Coast Guard around Scotland. Gordon, is there anything you would want to say about these?
Not a huge amount. I think one of the things like VHF, like in terms of VHF and a Channel 16 watch, I can assure you that there will be one operator at each MRCC, and his only job is to listen to Channel 16s. So it's not something that's on in the background or someone physically, just that is their only role for the period of their watch, is to monitor that. 24, I'm just talking about the area we cover at the moment, 24 aerials on the east coast of Scotland, including Shetland and Orkney, and I think it's about 20 down the west coast. So around Scotland, you're talking between 40 and 50 VHF sites. There's some areas where we've got what we call primary sites and secondary sites. Secondary sites tend to be a single aerial put in an area where there's maybe a blind spot. But we've got pretty much good coverage around all the coast. Although, as everyone's aware, if you get in close under cliffs, VHF's line of sight, so sometimes that signal will be sort of hidden and we won't receive it. But as we spoke about earlier, the benefits is if we don't receive it, maybe a close by vessel will receive it.
Fantastic. So this line of sight, it's just worth highlighting it from kayakers. We're quite low on the water. So they get the curvature of the earth. I think at standing height, it's typically 1.8 nautical miles, isn't it, to the horizon, unless you're a flat earther. But for those of us who live on the globe, then you can see here this useful table down the bottom. I've taken it from the VHF manual from the RYA, and I'll share the link to that at the end. But yeah, from this here, you can work out, your antenna height and how far you might be broadcasting. Is there anything you would want to add in, Ian?
Yeah, just not to be too scared with that. And if you are in a kayak with your handheld, maybe a meter above the water, yes, line of sight of about 2.5 miles would apply to another kayaker. But if you're making a call for help, you're calling one of those Coast Guard aerials, and they're like bloody skyscrapers. So your VHF range is more than adequate around the coast if you're making a distress call that the Coast Guard will pick it up. It's only going to be limited range if you're trying to talk to somebody else who's lying around on the surface of the water like you are.
Great. And it might also point to, if you do have the luxury of being able to get some height to broadcast a Mayday or to set off your DSC, then that's certainly something to take advantage of as well.
And there's a question just been raised about the range and whether the range is affected by the wattage of the set. No, not particularly. A little bit, but the wattage is putting power out. So you're sort of shouting with your wattage. So it'll give you a little bit more range. And that's why we recommend to people that you use low power most of the time, but always use high power if you're going to call for help.
Fantastic. I've noticed that Rachel's raised the question, or raised, the point that some of our colleagues haven't done the training. So presumably they haven't done the training. Not only have they not done the training, it's unlikely that they'll have an Ofcom license, but they're using the VHF. So is this what's the law here, and what do we encourage? And should people feel if they haven't done the training and they're in an incident and they haven't got the Ofcom, they shouldn't use their VHF, or what? What's the practical realities here? Ian, I think it's probably a good one for you.
Okay, and Gordon might want to come in as well, because this is one where the strict letter of the law is highly unlikely to be followed. The fact that you are required to have a license, if you thought that meant that you shouldn't call for help when your life is at risk, I don't think there's anybody in this group or a wider group would say, "Oh yeah, you're absolutely right. Put that VHF to one side and drown."
It's quite interesting. There's two sides of this because there's the Ofcom license and there's the RYA short range certificate. It's an Ofcom license you can obtain online without proving that you've got a short range certificate. So you can get a license to use the set quite easily. And as Ian says, the likelihood of someone asking if you've got a short range certificate is highly unlikely.
Great. So, you know, to be clear, we're encouraging you to obviously look after yourself and look after others, and use any means that you can to call for help that's appropriate. But Ian, you know, you're also an instructor and an assessor for VHF. You know, perhaps for those who see it just as an unnecessary expense, could you just, you know, explain why, maybe just top level, why should a kayaker consider doing the RYA certificate?
Well, we've just said that you'd get away without it, but I would suggest that if your life is at risk or somebody in your group needs help urgently, you want to be able to make that call in the most effective way. So being trained, knowing how your system works, knowing what language to use, what information to get across to make the most effective call could be the difference between life and death. But in any case, well, having a VHF radio on your vessel, whether it's a kayak or a racing yacht, or even a lifeboat, 90% of what you're going to use it for is asking somebody, you know, what do they take sugar in their coffee, and still being able to do that in a way which doesn't cause offence to other radio users, gets your message across in the shortest, sharpest, most succinct way, is going to be a benefit. If you're going to fork out 300 quid for a radio, you might as well fork out 50 quid for the training.
Great.
That wasn't a quote.
I think Tony will probably agree with me on this point as well as for calling for help. A VHF is invaluable on the water just to get a grasp of what is going on around about you. And Tony will know more than most. Oban Harbour and ferries going out of there, in and out of there all day long. They use their VHFs calling in all the time, and it gives you a great awareness of what other ships are doing, being able to listen to it.
That's fantastic. So
Yeah, strongly agree with that, and it goes beyond that. There was an incident a few years ago on the west side of Mull where quite a lot, there was a club were out together, quite a lot of paddlers, mixed ability. They were hit by a massive squall which came through. It knocked a few people in and it scattered the group considerably. But the club were well equipped with VHFs. And the result of that was that even though they'd lost sight of each other, they were able to get their groups re-coordinated, get people to land. They knew whether they got everybody and whether they hadn't got everybody. So they coordinated the club rescue. Everybody was fine. And on top of that, the Coast Guard heard all this going on their VHFs and sent the Tobermory lifeboat around. So it all turned out all right for lots of different reasons. And so because they were well equipped and they knew what they were doing and they knew how to use their VHFs.
fantastic. Now, we are, I'm going to, oops, sorry, one too many there. This isn't a VHF course tonight. So we're not going to go through everything in deep detail, but we'll just cover through, for those who are maybe less familiar, we'll cover through some of the different types of ways of using it, some of the issues to be aware of. When calling, there's 4 different types of call. Is that right? Ian, do you want to take us through this part here?
Yeah, I can do.
Just at a high level.
Yeah, sure. Okay, so routine calls are what we do most of the time, and it's listen or speak to each other or to other people as Gordon was saying about like listening to CalMac boats coming in and out of Open Bay. The others are one form or another of safety traffic, and they're escalating there. So at the peak of it is a distress call. Again, the English distress, French Mayday from Help Me, which you'd use if there is grave and imminent danger to a person, vessel, or aircraft, and immediate assistance is required. The next level down from that is an urgency call or a pan call, from the French pan, broken down. You would make a pan call if you needed help, but you weren't in grave and imminent danger. For example, in a motorboat, your engine's broken down, or in a sailboat, you don't have an auxiliary engine and the wind has died. You've no way of getting home without a tow. That would be a pan call. A safety call is information that you would like to have shared with other people for the safety of navigation. The most common one is the weather updates that the Coast Guard put out at regular intervals, but it might also be if there is a navigation buoy broken loose or something that people trying to navigate in a particular area ought to know about so they can go about their business safely.
Fantastic, thank you. And then, you know, it's not just about having equipment, it's about knowing it. It's about your being able to use it when under duress. So it's, you know, I think these are some of the kind of sort of functionalities here. Tony, from your experience of on the water, you know, would you agree with this list, or you know, when it comes to familiarity with equipment, or is there anything that's missing, or which would you say is the more important parts?
I think I would want to add an additional item to this, which I alluded to before the kind of open session started, which is my experience with clients is that they buy VHF, a few actually do the course, and then when I put them in a position where there's a little bit of pressure on, or I mean that pressure can be just actually calling the Coast Guard to do a radio check, just that, people fall to bits because they're not familiar with it and they get kind of tongue-tied. I had one person who was actually a minister of a church and was obviously used to speaking to huge numbers of people, and he got his certificate and everything. And when I got him to call the Coast Guard and say that we'd finished the exercise that we were doing, he just went into complete stage fright. It was quite interesting. People muddle their words and all sorts of things. So what I encourage people to do is to practice dummy conversations. A really good opportunity is if you're traveling somewhere in the car with someone, or even on your own, actually, have a VHF style conversation. You know, use the procedure, get used to it. It doesn't matter if you muff it a bit, like no one will mind. But if you've practiced that, practice giving a mayday call, for example, then when you come to do it for real, you'll do it quicker and you'll do it smoother, and there'll be less chance of making a mistake and sending the rescue people to the wrong place.
Fantastic. I know we've got some of the participants on the call took part in a training exercise with VHF recently. I don't know if any of you would like to share your thoughts about that. Don't have to, but I'm seeing Julie and Ryan here. Would either of you like to explain how that happened? Just come off mute if you'd like to speak.
Yeah, it was a great exercise to do. It was at night time that I guess added to a little complexity to a little complexity to the communication. I was on the shore and our boat team were out of our sight for quite a wee while, so we didn't know if there were. So there was a wee learning there in where the breakdown of communication can happen, and it was a very cold, wet, windy night, quite late, and it was dark. And it kind of for me, it highlighted the importance of really clear communication. We were also It was an exercise. We were kind of rotating it between everybody in the group, so that everybody had a little bit of practice. But my takeaway from it was, especially when you didn't have daylight, was how important clear communication needs to be.
Great. So this was a club exercise. It was organised brilliantly by David Simpson from Lothian Sea Kayak Club. And he'd liaised with the local authorities, the Port Authority, Coast Guard, and had got access to the M1 and M2 channels for use at Portobello. And he effectively set up a kind of sea-based orienteering course. And the sea party were told where to find their treasure by the shore party. And so it really kind of, throughout the evening, it was amazing how much people tightened up their communication. Has any other clubs done anything like that, or does anyone got any further suggestions for how people can practice and get use?
No suggestions for how to practice, but I would say if you're calling into the Coast Guard to do a radio check, anything like that, and you're a little bit nervous about it, I've been in the Coast Guard 10 years now. Before that, I was in the Merchant Navy. I've been using VHF for 33 years, pretty much solidly. But most of our staff don't have any maritime background whatsoever. And if you're calling in for a radio check, we probably have one of our trainees answering it. So they're probably as nervous as you are at the Coast Guard end. So really kind of bear that in mind, that the Coast Guards aren't all confident in it as well, especially when it's routine chat, because we use that routine chat to train our Coast Guard officers.
I'll come in there as well. It's relevant to a question I've just answered on the chat. Don't ignore UHF radios. It doesn't have to be VHF, particularly for a training exercise. Unlicensed UHF radios, you can buy or hire a pack of waterproof, cheapy UHF radios. You can say pretty much what you like on them. They're great for chat, and they'll get people used to press to speak buttons and talking and just getting more confident in using handheld radios in a safe environment.
Great.
Can I just pay tribute to the Coast Guards, actually, because over the years, I've heard quite a few messages, Mayday messages or PAN messages go out and be responded to by the Coast Guards. And I've always been very impressed by how they'll receive an absolutely scrambled message by someone who's clearly having a bit of a panic and doing it all wrong. And they've been very, very patient and supportive and calm. It's really impressive to hear. They're really professional.
But for the most part, we actually like a VHF call, mainly because of that sort of two-way conversation where like only one person can speak at a time. So we can ask a question, get an answer, ask a question, get an answer. Whereas when you're on a telephone call, people have a habit of just screaming down the telephone line at you. And a bit of training, and people expect that question answer thing of VHF. So sometimes VHF can be like make our job a lot easier. Although obviously it's maybe not always as clear, just because it is radio.
Great. So that's quite interesting. It goes back to the kind of earlier point that it clarifies the thought process, which is great. There's a number of different channels with specific use. Again, this isn't, of course, we're not going to go into this in depth, but Ian, is there anything you would want to highlight here from the channels?
I think they're all pretty self-explanatory, except perhaps channel 70 and the no voice transmissions on channel 0 is key. Most of the modern handhelds won't allow you to select channel 0 for a voice call. Some of the older ones still do, but channel 16 is your main one for distress, and most of the distress working still stays on 16.
Great, thank you. And Gordon, the Coast Guard were like, if it is a routine call, they're likely to transfer you onto a working channel. Do you want to just is it worth highlighting which ones you typically use?
Yeah, certainly in terms of Coast Guard, our main working channel 6-7. We'll put people to 6-7 pretty much immediately. Some people are different. It's always good to establish someone does need help, because you'll be amazed at the amount of calls that we get for help that don't use the pro words whatsoever. Most Mayday calls will start off with just someone shouting help, help, help down the radio. And the fishing community are kind of quite renowned for being very calm, just calling you up, asking for a routine channel, and then they'll tell you that they're sort of knee deep in water.
Right. Wow.
But yeah, 6-7 and 7-3 we'll use.
I think I'll just add something to that as well, and Gordon would probably agree. We would all far rather that you called too soon than too late. We'd rather be there and find we're not needed than be needed and find out we're not there. Yeah. I don't know anybody in any of the emergency services who would criticize somebody for making in good faith a call for help when it turned out it wasn't needed. I've several times been halfway to a job and been stood down because it's been resolved, and you breathe a sigh of relief at that point. You don't say, "Oh, bloody hell, somebody's called me out in the middle of the night and I could be asleep now." You think, "Thank goodness they're all right." Genuinely.
Fantastic. I mean, to reprise the point about the value of listening, is it Reed's Almanac? Is that where we'd be pointing people to understand what the local kind of ports information is likely to be transmitted on?
No, I would recommend a pilot book rather than an almanac. An almanac is too formal. Pilot book is nice and gentle and informal, and it's been created by the people who know the local area.
Fantastic. So that's typically in Scotland, like the Clyde Cruising Club sailing directions. Great.
Yes.
Julie, brilliant. Do you want to come in? You're on mute.
Yeah, a wee question. If you did put out a Mayday call and a vessel nearby responded, does the Coast Guard always still come out?
In terms of what we do in the Coast Guard in terms of search and rescue coordination, we'll receive the initial Mayday call. We'll put out a Mayday relay. As you say, another vessel might respond. More often than not, we probably will send a lifeboat out because as much as having another vessel on scene is good, having the professional response of a lifeboat going just gives sort of better service, and especially if someone's needing any casualty care, if there's any injuries. The RNLI got very good training in casualty care, as does the Coast Guard rescue teams who may attend on the shoreline. But yeah, we will in most cases send out a lifeboat.
I would say as well, Julie, if there is a vessel in the area, if you're on a kayak and a Calmac ferry or a Northlink ferry turns up to help, you might be delighted to see them, but you will have caused all sorts of problems on board of how they're going to get down and sort you out. And if they can just shelter you until a lifeboat or a boat which is better equipped to deal with you at your level arrives, it's nice to have them there, but they're not the best people when you want to get picked out of the water.
Thank you. Very good point. Thank you.
Great question, Julie. Thank you. If anyone else has questions, keep them coming, please. So we're not going to dive too much into pro words, but it is quite interesting. We've talked about this idea of the formality of the simplex one at a time, speaking one at a time, creates, requires a structure, a specific use of language. At a high level, would anyone want to give a kind of top level kind of, thoughts on that? Ian, is there anything? I think that's kind of in your.
Okay, yeah, it helps. I mean, as you said, Russell, it's a formality, and it helps to be precise and to be exact. But at the end of the day, it doesn't matter. It's like all communication. If you can get your message across, that's what counted.
Great. And then phonetic, that's one people get hung up on. Should they worry about this or just do their best?
Do their best. And picking up on Tony's point from earlier about practicing in the car, following the car and reading out number plates to practice your NATO phonetic alphabet is quite a good way of learning it.
Brilliant.
Whilst we're talking about phonetics there, actually, I'll just bring this in quickly because one of the most important bits of information we need in search and rescue is a casualty's location. The Coast Guard are quite happy to take that location in any format whatsoever. We probably all know that What 3 Words is very popular at the moment. They've got a great marketing campaign and it does work, and it's a tool that we've got in our box. If you use a What 3 Words location, there's every chance that we'll ask you to spell that, which may take some time. So it's worth considering, do you want to spell out 3 8-letter words, or do you want to give us a 6-figure grid reference? Which is easier? But as I say, position is vital and we'll take it in any format. But I think if you're on the water, knowing a latitude and longitude or a grid reference is the way to go. Can
I give a personal, as sort of, maybe not official RNLI, but from a lot of experience, you can give your location as a Latin long and it's numeric, or as a grid reference as numeric. You can give it as What 3 Words. What I find most useful and what I would always prefer, and is probably easiest in a kayak, is a bearing and distance from something. If you're out if you're gone out from Oban, I'm 2 miles southeast of Lismore Light. The lifeboat crews, who are the ones most likely to come out to you, are all locals. They know their area inside out. If they've got to go and look up a What 3 Words, they've got to go and look up a latitude and longitude. Sure, they'll be on the way, but if they know exactly where you're going and your location is the single most important piece of information we need, if your battery's about to die, or before you drop your radio in the drink, if the only thing you can say is where we are, somebody will be on the way to you. If we know that there are 3 people and you're taking on water or your boat's on fire and then the transmission ceases, we've got a real problem. But if we know where you are, we'll get there and we'll sort out what the problem is when we arrive.
Fantastic. So that's, it feeds really well into, here we've got, the Mayday structure that's taught by RYA, Mark Daniel, and it's, the P, what we're hearing is that the P of position, that's absolutely critical. So know where people, so they know where to come to. Yeah, I know I'm wondering, rather than kind of go into this in depth, we're just going to keep going, but is there anything here from the Merc Daniel, any other kind of key information apart from, it's all key, but what else, if someone can't remember all of these different things, if they can only remember 2 things, their position, what's the other thing we would want them to be able to communicate to you?
Number of people.
Great. So there you go. Position and number of people. That's fantastic. So we'll go to the second poll now. And if Charlotte can work her magic, that would be fantastic.
Absolutely.
Am I allowed to vote for it? It scares me.
Absolutely, yes. Great.
I think that's everyone. I'll close the poll.
And if you could share it, that would be amazing. Well, there we go. So we've got half people saying I get by. But you know, that's a good chunk being quite honest about finding it quite scary. And I've just a very few, 10%, with finding it second nature. So, you know, it brings us to that key point that Tony made earlier on, which is, you know, trying to take the fear out of it, trying to make it so that it is more a source of, so that when there are other things that are genuinely scary happening in your life on the water, that this ameliorates that fear rather than adds to it. So I think one of the ways, what we'll do is we'll now do a wee kind of practical exercise. We'll just do it as a group together, if that's all right. We've got here a series of 4 scenarios. So I'd ask you to, first of all, just read the scenario, have a look at it. And then if you can type, all of you just type into the chat what type of call, what type you think is required here.
A bunch of copycats.
I know.
I think special prize goes to Alan Cadenhead for getting it in first. So well done, Alan. And you get a prize for being first. Would you like to come off mute and take us through it? Imagine this was an actual scenario. And if you don't, then we'll just keep moving down the list. Or if someone would like to,
My stomach goes, that's a heart attack.
Great. So do you want to take us? Imagine this is a for real call, and Gordon is going to be the Coast Guard because he is. So do you want to? That's the information you've got. Do the Mayday call for real.
Okay. So Mayday, Mayday, Mayday. This is Kayak Alpha Charlie, which is my call sign. Group of 6, southwest of Coon Point vicinity, stack number 8 between and Skierna. How can I see that? We've got the wrong prescription in tonight. Party of 6 got some with one member with a suspected heart attack. If you could send help, please. Over.
Do I have to jump in and be a Coast Guard here?
You can either be the it'd be nice to do the Coast Guard bit for a little bit, but also if you want to give feedback.
Yeah, I think there was a lot of information there. The minute we hear the word Mayday, our first sort of action as a 16 operator is to press F9 on our keyboard and start typing. If you talk too quickly, we won't get a huge amount of that information there. We're not all expert typers. So if you can keep it fairly slow, short sentences works, and leaving a bit of a gap between each sentence is always helpful for us, just to get that initial information down. You may find that we will ask you all that information again, but it's just to sort of confirm, like with most Mayday calls, we'll probably ask your position probably at least twice, if not 3 times, just so we're absolutely clear of where it is. But yeah, essentially that's fine for the initial Mayday call, and as I say, we would then take control of that call and go into that question answer scenario.
Fantastic. Well done, Alan. That was brave of you, and you provided good learning and performed really well. So thank you.
For the less confident, could I just say that if you picked up your handset and said something like, can anybody help? We're a group of canoeists who are paddling southwest of Kewen Point, and somebody's got severe chest pains. Can you help, please? It's likely to be equally effective.
Absolutely.
So don't get hung up on the language and the protocols. What's most important is you get that important information over.
We had a call
speaking as an
recently.
assessor.
We had a call recently. I think it was Shetland or Orkney, where we're sitting in. It was right at the end of a night shift, and someone said, like, someone on the radio said "goodbye forever," and that's all we heard. And that initiated a response from us, because if someone says "goodbye forever," that could be someone jumping off a boat, which is what we treated it as. It turned out that a vessel was finishing its contract somewhere and was leaving the area. So it was quite embarrassing for the person calling at the end of the day. He thought he was on a routine channel, but we will respond to everything we hear on the radio.
Fantastic. Okay, we'll go to scenario 2. So if everyone just take a second to read that. Then again, if you can type into the chat what type of call you think this warrants.
Pan.
Did you call yourself, Tony, or did other people call for you?
We'll come to Tony. Let's hold that one
Let's
first.
come to that, shall we?
Brilliant. So we've got, Liz, you've responded super quick there. Thank you for that. Would you be comfortable unmuting and doing this for, taking us through it? And then again, Gordon, if you're happy to be Coast Guard.
Right. Pan. This is kayak dolphin, requesting assistance. We're a party of 4 midway between Flatta and Benaluru, and one of our parties dislocated their shoulder. They can no longer paddle. We're likely to need help. Over.
Yeah, so again, coming back, it would be kayak dolphin. This is, trying to think, Stornoway Coast Guard. Can you say again your position? Over.
Kayak, I've forgotten who you are. Kayak dolphin, we are midway between Flatta and Benaluru. Over.
A kayak dolphin, this is Stornoway Coast Guard. Roger, and how many persons in your kayak group? Over.
Stornoway Coast Guard, this is kayak dolphin. There are 4 members in our party. Over.
Pan kayak dolphin, this is Stornoway Coast Guard. Roger, is the casualty with the dislocated shoulder still in their kayak? Over.
Stornoway Coast Guard, this is kayak dolphin. Yes, the dislocated shoulder person is in their kayak. Over.
We'll kind of stop there. I could go on, but yeah, that's kind of some of the questions that we would start asking. And at the end of that call, we would basically acknowledge that we've received that pan or mayday, and we would come back to you with what we were planning to do. I would probably ask your intentions, certainly with this one as well. It's part of our questioning is what are your intentions? Because the kayak group might have the intention of, okay, we've got someone with a dislocated shoulder. We're making our way to, trying to think where we are on that one, Cullypool, in which case that gives us an idea which direction you're heading. Might give us extra options for what responses we send. Oban Lifeboat, how long does it take Oban Lifeboat to get down there, Tony?
Oh, about 30 minutes.
30 minutes. So yeah, we'd look to see what your intentions are as well. The group may, although you're requiring assistance, there's still a lot you can do yourself before the emergency services get there.
Is it worth saying as well that although things might be very different up in the MRCC in the Coast Guard Centre, for the casualties out on the ground, you would not really recognise a difference between a pan call and a mayday call. If there is no mayday call happening at the same time, your pan call will be treated exactly the same as a mayday call, as far as you're concerned.
That's very much true. The response for either a pan or a mayday is quite often the same.
Excuse me.
Great. And in
So
terms of
don't be shy. If you're not sure, make it a mayday.
okay,
If in doubt, move it up a level.
fantastic. And in terms of well done, Liz, that was great. In
Can
terms
I
of
ask a question? Because it's in the chat. Do I have to keep saying who you are and who I am?
In terms of a mayday or a pan call, certainly, and every communication should start with the word mayday. The initial call, you say it 3 times, but every subsequent communication after that should start off with the pro word mayday or pan before you speak.
Good to know. Thank you.
And us Coast Guards are not always the best at it.
And if you're going to be completely pedantic, you can drop the name of the station you're calling, but you should always give your own name.
Yeah.
So mayday, this is Canoe, whatever, would be fine. But only if I'm marking it in an assessment. For real, I'm not going to care.
great. Before we move on to the next scenario, Tony, do you want to feed in anything here? You don't have to, just if you...
Do you want to hear the story then? I'll try and do it quickly.
Yeah, go for it.
Well, this is about 2.5 years. There's actually 2 related stories. The first one was what happened to me, which was that I was, to be honest, showing off in the Grey Dog Tide Race, and I had 3 clients with me. And I did a loop on the big wave. And when I rolled up thinking, oh, that'll have impressed them, I then realised that my right arm didn't work anymore. And my supraspinatus had pinged. So I turned it into an incident management thing. And it was a good 10 minutes before they really decided there actually was something wrong with me. And in fact, we didn't get any help at all. Their plan was just to tow me to Cuan Sound. I talked them out of that and got them to tow me to Cullipole. And it all worked out absolutely fine. We got there before the lifeboat would have arrived, and it all got sorted out. But at the same time, I actually had a client have a dislocated shoulder off the southern end of Kerra once. And I called the Coast Guard. I just called it in just as a working call because I'd stabilised the situation. Everybody was safe. I was towing casualty in a raft. We were heading the right way. But he was going to be in a lot of pain. So I talked it over with the Coast Guard. They sent the lifeboat down. And in about less than 15 minutes, this guy was sitting in a rubber raft with the Entonox, the gas and air on. His pain was sorted. They took him off to hospital. He got there nice and quickly. And it was all relaxed and no hassle. And the Coast Guard was very professional and it all worked nicely. So, it depends on the situation. It depends on the situation. If I learned from that experience not to worry about, should I call them or not? Just go for it because you can sort it out afterwards if it turns out not to be appropriate.
Fantastic.
I think just to add to that, Tony, I think in a lot of cases as well, there are cases where you go, I can deal with this, and it might take an hour to tow somebody somewhere else, but you gather statistics, we gather statistics as well, and even if the lifeboat isn't used, or maybe the Coast Guard team just meet you when you arrive wherever you're paddling to make sure you're okay, it adds to those statistics and we get a better understanding of what's going on with paddlers.
Mm.
Brilliant. Thank you for sharing your real life experience, Tony. It makes it really, brings it to life for everyone. So thank you.
I'd just like to add, I am paddling again.
Brilliant. Tony is quite. Few people know the Falls of Laura as well as Tony. So if you ever get a chance to be on the water with him there, I'd highly recommend it. Scenario 3. Have a look at this one, and then type in the chat what kind of call you think this might be. Can everyone see the text? I noticed that Liz can't. Can anyone else? Can I get a thumbs up from anyone who can see the text? Great. I'll read out the text. So the text is, one member of your party of 5 has lost their paddle. You do not have spare paddles, but you do have a tow rope. Your position is that you're at Carcraig, which is just to the east of Mayadulls Rocks. Your cars are parked in Aberdour Bay, which is up to the north.
Oh, the tide's not in.
Yeah, and the tide is favourable for your
Parking on the beach.
Great. So does anyone want to? Okay, so Les, would you like to jump in, come off mute, and tell us your thinking, and then perhaps take us through that.
Aye. Yeah, it's not an emergency situation, but if I can't find out where you're actually paddling from, but if you're in a raft and you're across the main channel here, shipping channel, then yeah, people need to know that you're in difficulty, but you know, until you get clear, really, that's the reason I would call it in.
Fantastic. Gordon, would you agree with that?
I'm just looking at some of the other comments. Yeah, right. There's a shipping channel there. A security message makes some sort of sense to alert people of a hazard to navigation, especially the group of kayakers being a hazard to navigation whilst they're crossing that shipping channel. That said, if I put my kayaker hat on and I look around and there's no ships coming in and out of there, I'm just going to tow to the shore.
So for the purposes of the exercise, so that's good. So that's great. We've got the realities, we're practical, and then we've got, I suppose it just depends on how confident we are that something fast is not going to come up on the shipping channel. But for the purpose of the exercise, let's go with what Les has suggested, the security. You're going to be a navigational hazard, and you just want to let people know. Les, do you want to just take people through that? Do you want to just do the call? And Gordon, again, you're Aberdeen Coast Guard.
Whereabouts am I supposed to be anyway? Oh, there.
Just under bottom right of the map. You're down at Craig.
Right. Okay. Security. Sea kayak orca. Sea kayak orca. Sea kayak orca. Information. Position. Medusa Rocks. Heading for. Where am I heading for? Craig. Where's Craig?
Heading to, it's just Aberdour, heading to Aberdour Bay.
Yeah, heading for Aberdour Bay. Kayaker's lost paddle. we are a group in a raft towing, heading. Yeah, that's something like that.
Yeah, I think in response to that, I would just come back with sort of kayak orca. This is Aberdeen Coast Guard. Message understood. Do you require any assistance? I would throw that in there, just in case. Answer would come back no, and then I would probably just come back with kayak orca. This is Aberdeen Coast Guard. Can you call again when you reach the shore? In the meantime, I would probably call Forth and Tay Navigation Services, who are responsible for navigation in that area, and let them know.
Yeah.
And I would just expect to hear from you when you get back ashore, unless it all goes wrong en route.
Fantastic. Well, thank you. Thank you, Les. I was lucky enough to attend a forward paddling clinic, which was tutored by Les recently. If you ever get a chance to do so, I would jump at it. I learned a tremendous amount.
I'll offer. Can you just go back to that one, Russell? I'll just offer a view on that one. This is a very, very localized navigation risk. And we don't need the Coast Guard to be putting it out to everybody in the Aberdeen area. I think it would be quite reasonable on there to either inform Forth Navigation, or because it's a little used shipping channel, if that was me, I would be quite happy to make a call of security, this is kayak, whatever, for urgent, for safety warning for vessels using Mortimer's Deep, listen channel 72 or whatever, get off channel 16, and just tell the local users who are interested that you're going to be towing a kayak across the Mortimer's Deep channel. You should be clear in 30 minutes or whatever it might be.
Fantastic. And to follow up the point that you made earlier about looking at the sailing directions from the likes of Clyde Cruising Club, if you had done that, you would know that 72 is used by the Forth pilots, and that 71 is the Forth Port Authority. So they're both appropriate channels. Great. So scenario 4, we'll maybe not do this as a call out one, but if everyone just quickly types in what type of call they think this might be.
Does it depend how expensive the camera is?
Great. So we're seeing from everyone, routine, which is great. And it's a good, so hopefully you've seen from these scenarios, ways in which you might be able to create your own scenarios and practice with your paddling pals, with your club. Yep. And there's nothing wrong with doing a routine calls to collect cheap or expensive cameras, particularly if it builds up your confidence in using your VHF. But you'd be looking to get off 16 as quickly as possible onto a designated working channel, which is going to be probably 6, 8, 72 or 77. Super. So, I mean, we've got a few slides left. We could go on forever, couldn't we? There's such a big subject. So I think we're just going to go a little bit at pace now. But I think that's, oh, sorry, Tony, brilliant.
Yeah,
Tony.
yeah, sorry, Russell, just my brain's a bit slow this evening. I should have said this a few seconds ago. In that scenario we've just had there, that's a good reason for when you've got a group on the water and you're split into two groups, make sure that you've agreed a working channel to call each other on, so you can avoid going onto 16 at all. You want your radio scanning the channel you've agreed and 16, and so you can avoid clogging up 16 at all.
Brilliant. Good. So another reason to invest in the course, to get more familiar with these good protocols, and then get familiar with your handset. So you're now getting into functions like dual scan and tri-scan. Great. I think the other point about VHF is, it was made really well earlier on, but I think Tony, you mentioned about it as a listening device, but Gordon, do you want to just maybe give us a wee oversight about how it's a source of weather information? If the apps aren't working, what's
yeah, indeed. I suppose I'll start off by saying the Coast Guard, as well as search and rescue, we're responsible for what we call 6 primary Coast Guard functions. Very briefly, one of those is maritime safety information, or maritime safety. And part of that maritime safety is providing mariners with weather information. We do that in a number of ways, but one of the ways is over VHF radio, where every 3 hours you'll hear Coast Guard station on the MRCC broadcast weather information every 3 hours for the local area. When I say local area, it's done on each aerial on certain channels. Maritime information broadcasts, they're kind of set up to go out at specific times. In Aberdeen, ours go out at sort of 7:30 in the morning, which is a full broadcast, which includes inshore forecast, shipping forecast, navigation warnings, submarine exercises, etc. And then every 3 hours after that, there's another broadcast going out. It's worth kind of having a look at like what we broadcast is essentially what the Met Office provide to us for their marine forecasts. It's worth having a look at the Met Office websites to see what's included in that. And you've touched on it briefly in this slide. There's certain terminology in the shipping forecast and the inshore forecast, which isn't normal to everyone out there. A lot of people are very geeky about the shipping forecast. I'm probably one of them. I've been listening to it my whole life. And there's a certain terminology that goes about with it. There is a glossary of that terminology on the Met Office website, which is worth having a look at. But as I say, it's just it covers our responsibility for providing safety information to mariners.
Fantastic. We'll send rather than go into the meanings, your terminology, we'll send a link to the Met Office and the suggested reading. So there's other ways of summoning help, so phone, DSC has been touched upon. We've got PLBs, AIS, Flare. I'll just kind of keep going at a little bit pace here. DSC has been covered a little bit. How many of you use, just maybe put your hand up, how many of you have a DSC VHF set? Any? Interesting. So one of the things you'll hear against it is that it drains the battery, which is true if you're in comparison to a standard VHF. But if you can switch, you can travel with it switched off, and if you have like some of the sets, I know from my ICOM set, if you go into the settings and preset it, you can still call a DSC alert from an off handset. So if you're wanting to travel with it without using up battery power, but are worried that it won't be a useful emergency device, provided you preset that, it will still work if you hold down the red button for 5 seconds. Phones are amazing these days, aren't they? I think it's Gordon, I found that quite eye-opening when you told me a little bit about just what's possible with the AML system that the Coast Guard have. Do you want to just give us just a quick bit of quick overview?
Yeah, so absolutely. Like we've talked a lot about VHF tonight, but for most kayakers these days, who are kayaking close to the shoreline, there's not many places around the coast now that don't have a phone signal of some sort, and it is a really good way of getting help. Disadvantages are you are only calling the Coast Guard. You're not speaking to other people on scene. You can't speak to the lifeboat who's coming to rescue you, stuff like that. But the beauty with phone at the moment, it's a very clear way of communicating with the Coast Guard, rather than issues over VHF. But there's a lot of technology in phones now which really help us in locating people. I'm just going through here. So talk like 999, talk about 999 calls. If you use the 999 system rather than the routine Coast Guard number, it does provide us with additional information. And when you place that 999 call, it goes to a BT call handler in the first instance, who then will ask you which service you require. Coast Guard is one of those services that they'll recognise, and they will forward it to the relative MRCC. You'll see a couple of things on the slide here. It mentions roaming. When you dial 999, even though your phone handset might show that you've got no signal, it can roam onto a different network. So if you're with EE, but there's only a Vodafone signal in that area, it will use the Vodafone signal. So there is really good coverage for 999 calls. When you make that call, the first thing that happens with us, you'll see the mnemonic ISAC there. That's enhanced information. I can't remember what it stands for now. Enhanced Information Service for Emergency Calls. That will provide the operator at the Coast Guard with your phone number, and it will provide you with some sort of location. The ISAC system itself, the location will be quite a large area, possibly up to sort of 10-mile radius of a specific point. It's based on mass locations. But with most phones now being smartphones, very quickly that ISAC information will be overwritten with AML information, which is Advanced Mobile Location. And essentially when you dial 999, you get through to BT, your phone will start using its location services, and it will provide the Coast Guard with your GPS position, which will display on a map within about 30 seconds of you calling. So in terms of letting us know where you are, we spoke earlier about position being vital. If you use the 999 service, we get that visually to us within about 30 seconds of you calling.
Good.
If we go back to roaming just briefly, if your phone does use a roaming service and a different operator, we won't get the AML and ISAC information. It's only if it's on your home network. And AML is specific to the Coast Guard. None of the other emergency services have that at the moment. So
I know we have a couple of times in the last 6 months or so asked somebody who's made a 999 call, which has been routed through the ambulance, to remake it to the Coast Guard so that we can get that position information. Gordon, just a question, because I'm not sure about this. If somebody dials 112 rather than 999, will all the same information come through?
112, just got in front of me. 112 will get ISAC information. Let me just look at AML. I've got it up in front of me here. I'm not sure we will with 112 on AML. I might test that next time I do a test call.
I'll say what I was up in Aberdeen at MRCC about 6 months ago, looking at AML, and it's staggeringly great. Love it.
And Gordon, you've mentioned that you can, with AML, when it's fully functional on your network, they can actually switch on functionality within your phone. Someone's asked here if location services on your phone are off, can AML switch it on? And I know you've mentioned about camera access as well.
Yes, that's maybe another one that I maybe need to test, but as far as I know, AML will switch on those location services. The cameras that I spoke to you is another system. We've got a system called ICU Hub now, which is similar to SARCall, which people may be more familiar with. Mountain Rescue use it in the mountains, where they will send you a text message to your phone, which you will respond to, and it will provide mountain rescue service with your position. The Coast Guard equivalent of that is the ICU Hub, where we can send you a message to WhatsApp or text message. You will respond to the message by clicking a link, and it will provide us positional information that way. But the ICU service also lets us access your phone camera if you allow us to. So if you're calling if you're calling in for an incident that you can see happening but you're not involved in, we can actually just get you to switch on your camera and point it in the right direction, and we'll see what you're seeing. So that's kind of very cool technology we've got at the moment. And the other one is, I wrote this down somewhere and I can't remember it, the name of it. There's on Apple phones at the moment, we also have a system again where we can, if a 999 call drops, we can then go into this separate system, which if the caller's dialing from an Apple phone, we can get sort of their positional information even after a call's happened as well. So lots of good stuff out there in terms of phone. And police band radio is now moving to a system, well, it already is, but they're moving to a new system now, which relies on telephone networks. So EE are the providers of that. So they've put up a lot of masts everywhere, because obviously the police need to have communications wherever they are. And as part of them putting up the system for the police, they're putting in more and more mobile masts everywhere now as well. So coverage is getting better all the time.
Fantastic. Now, we're just over 8:30, so we're full on time. We can look to either just wrap it up there, or if everyone's happy to keep going for a little bit, we can just do a quick dive into PLBs. Is everyone happy to carry on?
I think it's important that we do cover PLBs.
Okay, great. So we'll go at pace on it. So this is the COSPAS SARSAT, which underpins the 406 megahertz PLB. Who would like to give us an overview of that? Ian?
That's coming my way. Right, okay. I think that the diagram pretty much puts it all up there. So where am I? Try and get that on camera. So that's the size we're talking about now with a modern PLB. And depending on how much you're prepared to spend, you can add functionality to it. So at the very basic level, starting with position 1 on the diagram, if you set off your distress signal deliberately or accidentally from your EPIRB or your PLB, because an EPIRB and a PLB have the same functionality, effectively the only difference is the battery size. So an EPIRB, which is registered to the boat, will send its signal for a lot longer than a PLB, which is registered to the individual. But either signal goes up to the satellites. For most of us, for most of the time, they are the geostationary satellites, which if you've spent a little bit more on your PLB and you've got a GPS link in it, will send your unique identifier and your position and say somebody is in difficulty at this point. If you've spent a little bit more again, then we're looking at the line 7 on there. you can get a return link signal, which is great because people tend to set off PLBs in the big picture when they're out of radio range, or EPIRBs when they're out of radio range. So it's a bit like a flare. It's fire and hope. You push the button on your PLB or you push the button on your EPIRB, you hope it's sending a signal and you hope somebody's picking it up. On these modern ones with the return link, it sends a little signal back to your device, which sets a little blue light flashing on it, which says, great, somebody's heard me, I know something's happening. Otherwise, something's happening, but you don't know about it. And what is happening is that signal you sent up to the satellite gets sent down to a local user terminal, and then it gets transferred across, in the case of the UK, to our mission control center is the Joint Rescue Coordination Center at Fareham. Fareham will recognize the location from the position and send it to their local MRCC, Aberdeen, Stornoway, Belfast, wherever. Belfast will pick it up, Stornoway will pick it up, Aberdeen will pick it up and decide what assets they need to deploy to try and rescue it. If you are paddling in very high latitudes and you're outside of the range of the geostationary satellites, I don't know if anybody does that. I've only been outside of the range of the geostationary satellites once down in Antarctica, but that then works on another low orbiting, polar orbiting set of satellites, which will locate you in different methods, and they'll use Doppler to find you. It takes a little bit longer, but then the same sort of process happens. That distress message gets bounced around the place at the speed of light. Like, we're not waiting very long here until it reaches your local MRCC, and they decide whether they're going to send a helicopter or a lifeboat, or decide that perhaps it's just a kayaker, so it's no great loss to the world, and ignore it. Is anybody still listening? Right? Didn't we? That was just to see whether I got a reaction.
No, thank you. And it's, I've been told by your colleagues in the RNLI that if you have got a genuine, Mayday situation, to get everyone in the group to set off their PLB. No, they can't. The signals can conflict. If you set off multiple EPIRBs or PLBs, they can counteract each other. There is an argument for setting off one or two, but not all of them. And if you think you're going to be out for a long time, let one run its battery down, then switch another one on, let that run its battery down, then switch another one on. But don't put them all on at once.
I'm glad you said that, Ian. I'll give you a call next week about that, because we could do a chatting about that maybe a bit further.
Right now.
Because I have my own views on it as well. Basically based around, I might have 3 or 4 people in the ops room, and if I have to deal with the information of 6 different PLBs, it actually might hamper the SAR response.
Yeah.
Just due to manpower.
Yeah, I don't know where this idea has come from that you should set them all off. It's not. The manufacturers as well will say it's not the best idea.
It came from colleagues of yours down in southwest of England.
Yeah, I know, but I didn't like to point the finger at people wearing this badge.
But yeah, it's worth a discussion. It certainly is a discussion point, I think. I'm going to. I would like to cut in with another kind of point of view on here, but because Tony told me this, I would like him to say it. I don't want to steal his thunder. Tony, do you want to talk about the cost of a PLB?
Yes.
And what you told me and what you told everyone at Tavalic last year.
Yeah. I've changed the advice I give clients on this in the last about 3 years ago. So just to explain my point of view, I like these. It wouldn't cross my mind to go out without one. But there are lots of places around here and on the west coast of Mull where if you press the button on one of these, no one will hear you. Okay. I got one of these. I wouldn't go out without it. They don't work very well when your fingers are wet and it's pouring with rain. So I take that and I take that. And I take that because that's the one I've got faith in. And the conversation I have with people nowadays has changed from explaining all the different options and leaving it to them to choose. And now I say, just go and buy one of these. They're cheaper than bloody paddles. Like, why wouldn't you buy one of these? It costs less than your paddle. It slips in a pocket, and they work. I want that with me as well, but for me, these are the things to prioritize.
Fantastic, thank you. And then we've got here, you know, 3 different types. You've got on the left, you know, the one which both Ian and Tony, you know, have the Rescue Me PLB 1, I think that is. But they've also got one now which has got AIS integrated with it, and then there's a new one which isn't quite available in the shops yet, but they're advertising it, and it's the same people who do the Wessex flares, and it's got 406, AIS and DSE apparently built into it. Does anyone want to just give us a quick view as to what the value of having something like AIS might be as well in a device?
Yeah, let me pick that one up again then. So I think it's very well worth the money. For those of you who don't know AIS is the automatic identification system, and it means that your PLB or your distress beacon is sending out not just a digital signal to the satellites, but it's sending a VHF signal. VHF signal will be picked up by the vessels nearby, and they can see that on their screens, either a GPS plotter screen or their radar screen, and that will identify you as being a distress vessel, and it'll plot your position. So yeah, it's a big advantage. That one in the middle that you've got there as well, I think that's the new ocean safety one. So that also has the benefit of you can link that to an app on your phone. Not as big a benefit as you think. All it does is you can interrogate it with the app and it'll tell you what messages it's sent and received. It doesn't actually integrate your phone into the system, but it means your phone can give you a lot more information about what your PLB has been doing. But yeah, from the basic PLB, which just sends a signal, definitely add GPS. And if you can afford it, because it's not an awful lot more, add AIS to have when you're in need, you will wish you had done.
Can I just add on there as well? And I agree with what you've said there. Like the AIS addition to the PLBs is great. There are devices on the market which are AIS only, and they have a range of about 3 or 4 miles, and they're the bane of my life because most times are set off. We get no positional information. They're designed specifically for people working on workboats, whereas if they fall in the water, it alerts the boat that they're on that they've fallen over. It's of very little use to the Coast Guard, and it uses up a lot of our time. Whereas if it's part of a PLB, a 406 beacon, great. The individual ones, I would stay clear of.
Yeah, it's from an industry that I used to work in, and I agreed with you, Gordon, when they were buying them, but they're half the price, and their view was that it's a man overboard device, and the likelihood is in 90 whatever % of the times it's the boat they fell off, which is going to be the one that rescues them. So the sooner the people on the boat know it's gone, that somebody's no longer on the boat, the quicker they can pick them up again. But yeah, I agree with you, PLB rather than an MOB device all the time.
And as Tony says, it's cheaper than a paddle to buy a PLB.
The one on the right here is so it's I think what you're talking about is ones that are activated by water activated man overboard devices with AIS signaling. But one that's quite interesting to look at is you know, divers use this one here. It's called the Nautilus Lifeline. It's quite affordable. It's under £200. It's manually activated, and it's AIS only. So if you already had a PLB and you didn't want to replace it, but you wanted to add on AIS, one to potentially look at. I think we'll just go at pace now. There's a lot of acronyms here, and I'll share this in the sheets afterwards with links, you know, rather than kind of go into it here. And I'll point you towards things like the SOLAS regulations as well, so that people can read up on this should they wish. I think signalling is just the kind of the final part, which is that, you know, we've talked about distress calls, but signalling for how we attract the emergency services to our specific location, which might not be immediately, you know, apparent if you're in a maze of skerries or if you're low in rough water. So we've got, you know, a variety of kind of a variety of options here. Does anyone, you know, I think we're going to move quite quickly here into an area of yeah, you know, of opinion. So which is, what's the best way to you know, to be signaling in? So some people like pyrotechnic flares, some people like EDVs, others. Tony, you've got a perspective. Great.
Yeah, I still carry at least one pyrotechnic flare. And the logic for that is that particularly in this area, for all I know it occurs elsewhere, the first boat that's likely to arrive if you have a problem probably may well not be the lifeboat. More than half of the rescues around here, another boat gets there before the lifeboat does, and they haven't got the kit that the lifeboat's got. So I don't want to see them zigzagging backwards and forwards across a bit of water looking for me. I want them to come straight to me, so I have a flare so that I can go, hey, I'm over here. And the other thing is, I'm very keen on the SOLAS tape. We did an exercise with our lifeboat and a group of volunteer paddlers, and we found that at 400 meters at dusk, the lifeboat couldn't see us at all, even with the searchlight. But when we held up our paddles, we'd put SOLAS tape around the shaft of the paddle up near the blade. They saw us instantly. The moment we held the paddle up, they went, oh, they're over there. It was quite dramatic. So I have not so much the SOLAS tape on the kayaks, I might say. They didn't see that nearly as well. So all of my paddles, and I've got loads of them, have all got SOLAS tape around the shaft up near the blade. And I really like that.
Fantastic.
Good.
Great. And you're getting applause from Ian there. That's great.
Well, we're both all right, LI, you see.
I know from speaking to the helicopter at Inverness, they would definitely swear by SOLAS tape as well. They operate with something ridiculous like a 3,000 watt floodlight, and when you shine that on a bit of SOLAS tape, you can spot it miles away.
Tony, if I could just request as well, if you've got any spare SOLAS tape, could you just stick little bits on pot markers as you go past, please?
So there is I'll send around the link to this here. It is worth bearing in mind that the RYA's position these days is against pyrotechnic flares. That's their, you know, I don't know, Ian, if you want to, I'm not going into it in depth here, but they're basically saying for under 20, their recommendation is that no boat under 24 meters in length is what they recommend. But the law, I believe, is it 13 meters? Is it? Yeah, 13. If you're under 13 meters, then you don't have to carry the pyrotechnic. But at the moment, if you're over that you do.
Yeah, I think that's reasonable. It would be nice to see some parity between leisure and commercial vessels here. Yeah, I mean, like paper charts, we're moving away from nasty, dangerous pyrotechnics. We are moving away from, but we haven't completely left them behind yet in either case.
Great. And Tony?
I do have a concern about this, actually, which is that I agree that LED flares work really well at night. But remember my data there where all of those fatal kayaking incidents occurred during daylight. I'm a bit unconvinced about LED flares during daylight. I've seen some American Coast Guard research which really doesn't rate them at all. But to be fair, the research was done 4 or 5 years ago, and I think things have improved. So I think
that was with the old Greatland laser flares, wasn't it, as well? And
Oh
I
yeah,
agree.
they were hopeless. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree with you. But I think LEDs at night and smoke during the day is a pretty good combination.
I can only sort of quote one incident, but I know, like, I had Inverness helicopter going to an incident with a paddleboarder on Loch Ness quite a few years ago. And another paddleboarder actually assisted them. And when I asked if they had any means of signalling, and they had an LED flare, they switched it on, and the helicopter saw them from about 2 miles away, and that was during the day. So I was quite impressed with that, but that's a one-off incident. You mentioned smoke there. Smoke during the day is great, because not only does it like provide smoke for a minute or so, it just dyes all the water around about you bright orange.
If we're going low tech, don't ignore the old rescue streamers. Again, you got a 10 or a 25 meter orange fluorescent floating streamer in the water around you. The helicopters have been able to pick them up as well, and it's got no expiry date. It's easy to carry, easy to use.
Oh, I like low tech, Ian. A mirror on a sunny day will blind a helicopter pilot.
Yeah.
Well.
like a parachute flare at night.
Yeah.
So signaling.
Actually, the reflective mirror came out top in the American survey, which I thought was interesting. But then they get sunshine.
I was going to say, tell me, you're in Scotland now.
You need a rain mirror. If we had a rain mirror, it'd work perfectly then, yeah. Fantastic.
Does any of our audience have any questions on any of that, or any thoughts, without getting into too big an argument over what's best?
You're on mute, Jane. I think you were going to say something. Nope.
I think I'm just going to be brave and do the VHF course now.
Brilliant. Fantastic.
I have embarrassment, but needs must.
That's great. Well, we'll send round Ian's contact details as well. He's his company. He does instruction and assessment.
Russell, I don't want to use this as a sales opportunity. And I know you're all spread out all around the coast. So what I'd suggest is you go on the RYA website, and there's a find a training center option on there. You can put in your address, and it will tell you what RYA centers there are local to you that are running that course. Or alternatively, I said in the chat earlier, I think you can just do it online, and then you can do it wherever, whenever you like. Either way, then you'll need to do a face-to-face assessment when you finish the course, but you can do the course whatever way suits you best, and your time availability, cost-wise, it's pretty much the same, whether it's classroom or online for most providers.
Fantastic. And if you're organising it for yourself, then we'd encourage you perhaps to organise it for the group of paddlers that you go with, or if it's a club. So, that if you do it as a group, sometimes you get it cheaper, but more importantly, it allows you to build that sense of shared skill and familiarity between you.
I noticed, I think it was Skeg or the Lothian were putting out a course, and I think there was some spare spaces, so I'll check that out.
Superb, great. I think Ian was on the call. I think you might be involved with that. I don't know if you want to do a shout out just now, if you're still there. We can maybe always put it in. I've got a raised hand from Michelle Matuza.
Hi there. So I'm a paddleboarder, and I paddle in the sea close to the shore quite often, and pretty much always on my own. And I've been really wanting to look into like these different things that I can take with me to help keep me safe. obviously looking, you know, I know you're saying that some of these things aren't that expensive, but when you're adding the cost of all this stuff up between training and courses and stuff like that, like actually is quite a lot of money. So what order would you say is the best thing to sort of to get? And, you know, there's a lot of small things, little wins here. I can see like something like the floating streamers, like that's amazing. The tape, you know, stuff like that. It's all really good advice that I didn't know, you know, didn't know those things existed. But I'm just really curious to try to figure out like what road should I go down?
Connecting.
Yeah, what would you recommend?
Great. Who would like to come?
I'm happy to jump in here, and like from a Coast Guard perspective, it's all about being able to contact us as quickly as possible and in something that works. Voice to voice communications is great because we can have that two-way conversation about what is going wrong, what situation you're in. I assume you've already got a phone that you can put in a waterproof pouch. If it was a toss-up between a VHF and a PLB on top of that phone you've already got, I would say a PLB. Because you've already got one means of two-way conversation. The only thing that doesn't give you is some method of speaking to the resources that are coming to help you. So you haven't got any way of speaking to the lifeboat or helicopter. But the PLB is definitely that one thing that if you're in serious trouble, it will work without a doubt.
That's not necessarily going to be always the case, Gordon. It'll certainly if you've got an inshore boat coming for you, but most of the offshore boats, the LBs, one or two of the crew will have mobile phones with them.
Yeah.
If you need to speak to them, then just pass your mobile number through the Coast Guard, and the lifeboat will at least be able to call you back. You can establish that two-way communication.
Is there, would it be recommended, like, let's just say I'm going out for a long paddle on my own, and to be honest, I actually had the Coast Guard called on me once, so that was fun. Because I was out on my own, someone thought I got blown away, but I didn't. I was fine. Would it be a smart idea to maybe call ahead and say, hi, I'm Michelle, I'm going to be on a paddleboard, I'm starting here, going here, this is when I'll be out?
Definitely, we'd always recommend that. We do log all the calls that come in. What I would say is if you say that you're going for paddle, you're leaving at 1 o'clock, you expect to be back at 4. When 4 o'clock arrives, if you haven't phoned us back, we'll not immediately send everything out. It's only when someone then, what you should do when you go for a paddle is let someone you know that you're going for a paddle, so that if you don't return, they can call us and say, I was expecting, is it Michelle back at 4 o'clock? She's not arrived back. Then we would start looking into what might have gone wrong. And if we've had that communication with you earlier on the day, we can look back at our radio log and say, oh, well, she did phone in at 1 o'clock and she said she was going to be back by 4 and it's now 5 o'clock. We've had a call concerned about her safety because she's not came back, and we will start taking action. And if we know where you were going, we've already got an idea of what area you might be in. So yeah, it's always worth it. The calls are generally very quick. Can a minute of your time to let the Coast Guard know where you're going.
Michelle,
if I answer the call, I'll probably keep you on for 5 minutes just to ask what you're doing and where you're going. And
Michelle, you'll get away with that in Scotland because we've got a lovely bunch of Coast Guards. But if you were taking your stand-up paddleboard or whatever you've got down to some of the busy areas down south, and you try and call them to tell you where you're going, they will send you away and tell you need to speak to your local marina or somebody ashore or something. But yeah, in Scotland, while you're paddling around Scotland, make the most of it. We've got a great bunch of guys out there.
That shouldn't be the case, Ian. It shouldn't matter where we are. We should take.
It's published though, Gordon. Especially down around the Solent.
Solent, yeah. They say Solent. I think they recommend you get in touch with your Coast Watch.
Yeah.
People.
Yeah, that seems a good time to bring up Safe Tracks. Gordon, do you want to just mention Safe Tracks?
Yeah. So RIA Safe Tracks is essentially a mobile phone app. which you can put on sort of passage plans on it, including the number of people. In RYA terms, they look at how many people might be on your sailing vessel or whatever. But if I was using it, I would put how many people are in the group. And it can actually provide the Coast Guard Operations Centre with your position. The downside of it is it uses up battery life on your phone because it's using those location services all the time. But the part of Safe Tracks I really like is you can put all your information in there, including ice details. Sorry. Yeah, so you can put in loads of details there, including like ice details in case of emergency details. You can put registration numbers for your vehicle. So if someone reports, and quite often we do get reports of a vehicle being left at a harbour and it's been there for a day and no one's came back to it. So those details can be in which if we get a call saying someone's overdue, we can go to that database and find a whole load of information on you. You can put in there photographs of your paddleboard, kayak, whatnot, so we know what we're looking for. So as a database for your information, it's a great resource. As a tracking system, maybe not so. Not to have on all the time, but again, if you get into that situation where you are in trouble, make the call to the Coast Guard and say, I'm going to switch my RYA Safe Tracks on at that time. And then that GPS position can be relayed as well. So it's a great resource, and I would recommend any paddler to put their information on it.
Fantastic.
In answer to Robert's question on the chat, would the Coast Guard check Safe Track details as a matter of course? When we're alerted of an incident, the more information we can find, the better. So if we're alerted of an incident, we may look at all our databases. So we've got the Beacon Registry, we've got Safe Tracks, because we might be looking for next of kin details or whatnot. So we'll use all those databases when we're alerted of an incident. We don't go in there and just have a nosy just to see who's paddling round about the coastline.
Great. One final question is just on InReach. Is there any quick thoughts on InReach?
It works. It's another system. In terms of a satellite-based emergency system or distress system, I think you can't. I think PLB is a designated search and rescue system. InReach and spot devices, they do have that capability, but it's through a communications provider. So the information goes to that communications provider first and then on to the Coast Guard. The communication provider isn't trained in search and rescue. They may not, I don't know what their training is on it, but there may be delays in the information getting back to us through it. Whereas the COSPAS, SARSAT satellite and the 406 beacons work all the time. The other thing with a PLB is that it's designed to have a battery life that will last at least 24 hours once you set it off, whereas an InReach or a spot device, if you're using it as a communications device as well, when it comes to the time where you need it in an emergency, the battery might be dead.
Will Copestake speaks about his use of the InReach device for expeditions in Patagonia in another one of these, and you can see the video of that in this webinar series. So have a look. He's had positive experience of it, but specific use cases, and his experience of Spot was problematic for all the reasons that Gordon has set out. Great. So I think that we've taken a lot of our expert panel's time. So thank you so much to them. If you would like to learn more, thoroughly recommend this book from the RYA. It bears repeated reading, and it is the course manual for the VHF qualification. I'll share again at the end here just the contact details for everyone, and this will go out on the reading list. But feel free to take a note of it just now. But yeah, I would just really like to thank everyone for participating so well, and our super knowledgeable panel for sharing, you know, the fruits of many years of practical experience so freely tonight. Thanking you.
I'll just say, if anyone wants to visit Aberdeen MRCC, or indeed any other MRC Stornoway in Shetland, will accommodate visits for kayak clubs and whatnot, and show you around. So just get in touch with your local MRCC if you want to visit as part of a club.
Great. Any final words from yourself, Ian or Tony?
If anybody would like to donate money to the RNI, it's always welcome.
Tony, anything you would like to say?
No, I think we've pretty much covered it. I think we covered the point that my strong belief is that actually you need more than one device, but I would certainly rate that as number one.
Yeah.
Wonderful, great, and thank you to Charlotte and Paddle Scotland for creating the forum for this to happen.
Absolutely, and to all of our members that have shown up for many webinars over this winter. It's been great to see the turnout, so thank you very much. And to Russell as well for stepping in and organising some great guest speakers and a great Paddling on the Sea series for this year.
Could I just ask, how do we see what other webinars are available?
So the webinars are available to book through the Just Go system. So when you log in, on the top of your page on Just Go, there's a button for events and courses. You can then filter for online events, and that's all of our webinars and courses that take place online. If there's any specific areas of interest, then feel free to email in and I can point you to specific webinars that are going on.
Okay, that's the Just Go website, is it?
Yeah, sca.justgo.com.
And this Paddling on the Sea series is the videos are on YouTube. At the moment, they're privately listed, but we can, if you reach out to Charlotte, she can share the other ones in the series. And any luck, maybe they'll be put into a kind of shared list at some point. Great, thanks a lot, folks.
Okay, thank you.
In the feedback form, there's a feedback form that comes out, and if you get any kind of questions, just follow up with any of us. Our details will be in the in the suggested reading that follows. Cheers.
Cheers, thank you.
Tony, I know you've been on for a couple of hours. Can I have a chat with you for 10 minutes?
Yeah, delighted, yeah.
Thank you.
I don't know if we can just stay on this chat or whether we need to open another chat or just give you a phone.
Sorry, Gordon, were you including me in that?
No, it was
Oh,
just
good, right.
regarding
Because
Tony's
Well,
statistics.
just before you
go.
I'll just we're almost. What we'll do is we'll maybe just wait until it's just ourselves, and I just want to say thanks, and then
Everyone else can stay and listen to me and Tony's chat if you want. Well, once the participants are away.
Okay, great. So I think that's just us. Thank you so much, all of you. I really appreciate it. I know that was a bit of a marathon, went on for a couple of hours, but I think the fact that we'd pretty much everybody stuck through to the very end and we're still feverishly asking questions just shows the level of interest and how engaged they were with your knowledge. So really appreciated.
You'll probably have noticed that I put my earphones on and popped out. That was to take my supper off of the hob.
You managed successfully.
Yeah, it's all good. I'm looking forward to eat it, but we've got time for a chat.
Right. I need to go. Tony, say hello to Ali and Tom for me.
Will do.
And Ped. I'll pop in next time I'm over there.
Good. Yeah.
Right.
Give me a shout if you're coming.
I will do. I will do. And Russell, maybe see you on the water before too long.
Absolutely. It'd be good to organise some more practical exercises with you and your team.
Yeah, we can certainly do that. Right. Cheers
Thanks
for
a
now.
lot.
Good night,
Cheers.
everyone.
Thank you. Bye bye.
Cheers, Ian. Right.
And Charlotte, if we jump out, will the call still work for Gordon and Tony?
I'm just swapping over to make Gordon the host, and that means I can leave the meeting and you guys can stay here.
Before you disappear, can I just ask, how many people did we have on the system there?
So we had, did take attendance, bear with me. That was 31 participants were on the call.
Okay, that's great. Thanks.
36 at peak, and then it dropped down to 32, 31 just for in that last half hour.
Okay, good. Thanks.
And then video, we'll share the video, and you can share the links to the video on
That's the point. I'll stop recording.
social channels. Wonderful.
Well, I think, Gordon, if you could maybe press the stop recording button, because I've now given you host permissions.
Oh yeah, I'll see if I can find that. No, stop video. Where's the recording button?
It might be in the more if you've not opened
Might
it
be.
before.
More record. Stop recording.